Welcome back, everybody. We're doing a deep dive today
Deep dive.
into the circular economy.
Ooh.
And specifically, how the EU is tackling it.
Yeah.
And what it all means for you.
For you, the listener.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And all of our information today is coming straight from the European Environment Agency's website, and it was updated December 5th, 2024.
Ooh, fresh data. So this is fresh intel.
Fresh data is always exciting, especially in such a
Yeah.
dynamic topic as the circular economy.
And this is a topic that I feel like I hear a lot about,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not sure I fully grasp it
Yeah.
until I dug into this report.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it's easy to get caught up in the buzzwords,
Yeah.
and all of that. But the real substance comes from understanding how profoundly different this model is from our current linear economy.
Totally. And I think when I think of circular economy, the first thing I think of is recycling.
Right.
But it sounds like that's only one.
Yeah, that's sort of the tail end of a
Yeah.
much longer process.
Okay. The circular economy begins with how things are designed and how they're produced and used with the goal of keeping materials in circulation for as long as possible.
So it's more about making things last longer and then repairing them, and then at the very end, recycling them.
Precisely. It's about shifting our entire mindset from this take-make waste
Okay,
to a closed-loop system.
that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
So what's the driving force behind the EU's push for this?
Well, the report lays out a pretty stark reality.
Yeah.
Europe is consuming
Yeah.
far more resources than the planet can sustain.
Oh, wow.
And it's not just about recycling rates, it's about how much we consume in the first place.
So it's like we're living on borrowed time.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
And the report highlights that even with recycling efforts, the total amount of waste generated is still on the rise.
Okay, so something needs to change,
Clearly.
clearly. And so the EU has the Circular Economy Action Plan,
Yes, they do.
which seems to be their big plan to make all of this happen. So can you give us like an overview of what is in this action plan?
Yeah, it's actually quite comprehensive.
Really?
It tackles everything from product design to waste management,
Wow.
with the aim of transforming various sectors of the economy.
So what are some of the specific things that this plan
Yeah.
aims to do? Like, are they going to, what are they doing to make sure that products are more durable and things like that?
Well, they're focusing on initiatives to make products easier to repair and disassemble,
Okay.
promoting the use of recycled materials, and even creating incentives for businesses to adopt circular practices.
Okay, so they're going to make it
Exactly.
worth their while to do that.
They're also trying to empower consumers to make more sustainable choices.
That's great. And so this plan has been around for a little while.
It has.
Are they actually making any progress toward these goals?
Well, that's where things get a bit more complicated.
Okay.
While the plan looks great on paper, the reality of implementation is a different story.
Okay.
The report reveals that while there's been some positive movement,
Okay.
Europe isn't quite on track to meet its own targets.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of targets are we talking about?
For instance, they aim to double their use of recycled materials by 2030.
Okay.
Sounds impressive, right?
Yeah, it does.
But here's the catch. As of 2022, they've barely increased it from 2010 levels.
Oh, wow.
So they've got a lot of catching up to do in a short amount of time.
That's a pretty big gap, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
We're facing some serious challenges.
Achieving a truly circular economy requires a massive overhaul of our systems.
Yeah.
It's not just about tweaking a few policies here and there.
Right.
We're talking about a fundamental shift in how we produce and consume.
Yeah, it's not as simple as just saying like, hey, let's just recycle more.
Exactly.
It's rethinking
It's the entire
what
life
is
cycle
the
of a
life cycle of it.
product from design to disposal.
And the report actually points out a crucial problem with how we're currently measuring progress.
Oh, yeah.
So right now, the focus is mainly on resource use and waste management.
Right. Things that are relatively easy to quantify,
Okay.
but to really understand the effectiveness of the circular economy,
Yeah.
we need to measure things like how products are designed for durability, how easy they are to repair,
Right.
how effectively materials are being reused.
So you're saying we're kind of looking at the end result rather than the whole process.
Right. Those aspects are much harder to quantify.
So even measuring this whole thing is a challenge in itself.
That definitely adds another layer of complexity.
Yeah. And so Europe is, in a lot of ways a leader in this whole thing.
Generally considered to be, yes.
But they're still grappling with how to
They are.
measure this
Yes.
effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a work in progress, even for those at the forefront.
Absolutely.
But are there any, like, bright spots? Are there any signs that things are at least moving in the right direction?
For instance, certain materials like aluminum, paper, and glass have well-functioning secondary markets.
And can you just explain what secondary markets means?
Essentially, it means that there's already a strong system in place for collecting, processing, and reusing these materials.
Okay.
They're already being traded and recycled effectively.
So for those materials,
Yes.
the circular loop is already
Somewhat in place. It demonstrates that with the right infrastructure and incentives, a circular economy can work.
But I'm guessing not all materials
Unfortunately, you're right.
are doing so well.
The report highlights that materials like wood and textiles are facing more challenges.
What makes them different from something like aluminum?
Well, there's often a lack of standardization with these materials.
Okay.
Think about all the different types of wood and textile blends out there.
Yeah.
This makes it much harder to sort, process, and reuse them effectively.
It's like if you try to recycle a mixed bag of plastic. It's a lot harder than if it's all one type.
Yeah, and on top of that, you have competition from new materials.
Yeah.
It's often cheaper and easier to produce new wood or textile products than to recycle existing ones.
So it's both a technical and an economic reality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've kind of laid out the problem. We've defined what a circular economy is.
Yes.
And we've explored how the EU is at least attempting to make this a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And we've even touched on some of the successes and the hurdles they're facing.
Yeah.
But what does all of this mean for us, the listeners?
That's a fantastic question.
How can we connect these large-scale systemic changes to our everyday lives?
That's a question that deserves its own deep dive.
Perfect. And that's exactly where we'll pick up after a quick message. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to explore what role you can play in this circular revolution. All right, so before the break, we were talking about how the EU is trying to build a more circular economy.
Yes.
But, all of these big targets and goals, it can feel a bit abstract and removed from our daily lives.
I understand that completely. It's easy to feel like these large-scale changes are beyond our control.
Right.
But the truth is, the success of the circular economy hinges on a collective effort. It's not just about governments and businesses. It's about each of us playing our part.
So what can we do as individuals to actually support this? Because honestly, sometimes it feels like my little actions aren't really going to make a dent.
But consider this. Every product you buy, every item you discard,
Yeah.
every choice you make contributes to either the linear take, make, waste model or the circular one.
So you're saying that even these small everyday decisions
Absolutely.
can make a ripple effect.
It's about shifting our mindset and adopting a more conscious approach to consumption.
Okay, so it's about being more mindful.
More mindful.
But what does that actually look like?
Well, think about the last time you needed something. Did you immediately go out and buy it new? Or did you consider buying secondhand, repairing something you already own, or borrowing from a friend?
I'm guilty of just clicking buy now way more often than I'd like to admit.
Right.
But you're right. There usually are other options.
And that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
It's about training ourselves to pause before we consume and consider more circular alternatives. The more we do it, the more it becomes second nature.
It's like building a new habit, a more
sustainable habit.
Sustainable habit. Okay, so buying secondhand, repairing, borrowing,
Mm-hmm.
those are some good starting points. What else?
Well, the report also highlights the rise of what's called the sharing economy.
Uh-huh.
Have you heard of this?
Vaguely.
Essentially, it's about shifting our focus from individual ownership
Okay.
to shared access.
Okay.
So think of things like car sharing services, tool libraries, or even clothing rental platforms.
Right. So instead of everyone owning their own car, we can share a bunch of cars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That cuts down on the number of cars being produced. It's a huge environmental impact.
Yeah. And the sharing economy also makes sense economically.
Absolutely.
And so-
It can be much cheaper to share access to something than to own it outright,
Right.
especially for things we don't use very often.
So win-win.
Win-win.
So we've got buying secondhand, we've got repairing, borrowing, embracing the sharing economy.
Yes.
But I'm also curious about the role of businesses in this.
Businesses play a pivotal role.
Okay.
Ultimately, they design, produce, and distribute the products we use.
Right.
The report emphasizes that a key aspect of the circular economy is better product design.
So what does that look like?
Well, imagine a world where products are designed with durability and repairability in mind.
Oh, okay.
Components are easily replaceable. Software updates extend the product's life, and when it truly reaches the end of its usefulness, it can be disassembled
Hmm.
and its materials easily recycled.
So that sounds like a very different approach than how things are designed now.
You've hit the nail on the
That
head.
my phone is basically glued together. You can't.
We're so accustomed to products that are designed for obsolescence,
Right.
that are meant to break down or become outdated quickly,
Hmm.
but the circular economy demands a different approach, one that prioritizes longevity and resource efficiency.
So getting away from that fast fashion mentality, not just with clothes, but with all sorts of things.
Absolutely.
But how do we incentivize businesses to make that change?
That's where government policies and regulations come into play.
Okay.
The EU is already exploring various approaches, such as tax breaks for companies that use recycled materials or implement circular business models.
They're going to try to use like financial incentives
Financial
to
incentive.
make it worth their while to.
Like that carrot and stick approach.
Right.
Reward the good behavior, penalize the bad.
And it's not just about financial incentives, right?
Not just about financial incentive.
Regulations can play a role too. It's like requiring a certain level of durability.
For example, the EU could set standards for product durability or require manufacturers to offer repair services for a certain number of years.
So a combination of incentives and regulation
Exactly.
to kind of nudge these businesses in the right direction.
Nudge them in the right direction.
And I'm also thinking about those materials we were talking about before the break, like wood and textiles that aren't doing so well in the circular economy.
Yes.
What can be done to improve their situation?
Well, one key area is improving infrastructure for sorting and processing these materials.
Oh, okay.
Another challenge is the lack of standardization we discussed earlier.
Right.
If companies could agree on more consistent material blends and production methods, it would make recycling much more efficient.
More collaboration
Absolutely.
from the industries.
Yes. And of course, research and development is crucial.
Yeah.
We need to invest in finding new ways to recycle and reuse these materials, especially those that are currently difficult to process.
So it's kind of a multi-pronged approach.
Multi-pronged approach.
Better infrastructure, more standardization, and
Continued innovation.
innovation. Okay.
Yeah.
As we've been talking, I'm realizing that this whole circular economy thing is about so much more
I'm glad you're saying that.
than just reducing waste.
It really is a holistic approach to creating a more sustainable and resilient future.
It's like rethinking our whole relationship with stuff.
Exactly.
You know, instead of thinking of things as disposable, we think of them as
Durability over disposal.
durable and how we can.
Creating a system that works with nature,
Mm.
not against it.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And it's important to remember that the benefits of the circular economy extend beyond environmental protection.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, for one, it has the potential to create new jobs and boost the economy.
Okay.
Think about all the new industries that could emerge around repair, remanufacturing, and material recovery.
So instead of throwing stuff away,
Exactly.
we could be
Creating jobs.
creating jobs and giving
economic value.
economic value by keeping those materials.
And by reducing our reliance on virgin resources, we can create a more secure and stable supply chain, less vulnerable to price fluctuations or geopolitical instability.
Wow. So it's not just about doing what's good for the planet.
It's about understanding.
So it's also about.
Our economic well-being is inextricably linked
Right.
to the health of our planet.
Mm.
We can't have one without the other.
That's such an important point.
And it makes me feel a bit more hopeful knowing that there's this potential for positive change on so many levels.
Yeah.
But I'm also realizing that this is a long-term project, a journey that we're all on together. There's no quick fix here.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
Mm.
It requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to embrace new ways of thinking and doing.
And it's not just about the big sweeping changes. It's about
So small, everyday choices.
those everyday choices.
Exactly. Every time you choose to repair something instead of replacing it,
Yeah.
every time you support a local business that embraces circular practices, every time you buy secondhand instead of new, you're contributing to this movement.
We all have a role to play.
It's about realizing that our individual actions, when multiplied across millions of people, can create a powerful force for change.
So we've explored how we as individuals can support this.
We have.
We've talked about the role of businesses and government policies, but before we wrap up, I want to bring it back to the European Environment Agency report.
Yes.
What are some of the key takeaways from that you think our listeners should really remember?
That's a great question, first and foremost. I think the report highlights the urgency of the situation.
Okay.
We're facing a real crisis of overconsumption and waste, and the need for change is more pressing than ever.
So this is a wake-up call.
A wake-up call we can't afford to keep kicking the can down the road.
Okay.
Secondly, the report demonstrates that the transition to a circular economy is not just a theoretical concept.
Okay.
It's already happening with tangible progress being made in certain areas.
So it's not just some distant utopia.
Precisely, and lastly, I think the report emphasizes the importance of collaboration. This is not a challenge that any one individual business or government can solve on their own. It requires a collective effort, a willingness to work together towards a common goal.
We're all in this together.
We are.
And that's a perfect segue to our final thought for today's deep dive.
Okay.
Imagine for a moment that you are in charge of designing a truly circular city. What would it look like? How would things be different
What a thought-provoking question.
from how they are now?
It really gets you thinking about the possibilities.
Okay, everybody, we'll be back after a short break to explore that thought experiment and wrap things up, so don't go anywhere. Okay, so we're back with that question. Imagine you're designing a truly circular city. What comes to mind?
What a fantastic prompt. It really forces us to think beyond just little changes here and there and really think about a totally different system. What about you? What pops into your head first?
Honestly, I think of a city just full of greenery.
Okay.
Like not just parks, but buildings with rooftop gardens.
I love that.
Vertical farms integrated into the architecture.
Yeah.
Food growing everywhere. Like the city itself becomes a productive ecosystem.
It speaks to a core principle of the circular economy.
Yeah.
Working with nature instead of against it in a circular city. Waste wouldn't be seen as a problem. It would be seen as a resource.
Right.
Food waste would be composted and used to nourish those urban farms that you envisioned.
And it's not just food. Imagine buildings constructed from recycled materials.
Right.
Designed to be easily disassembled and reconfigured.
Yes.
When they reach the end of their life.
Exactly.
No more demolition waste, just components being reused and repurposed.
And what about transportation?
Ooh.
In a circular city, private car ownership might be a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Instead, we'd have efficient and affordable public transportation networks,
Right.
bike sharing programs, and pedestrian-friendly streets.
It's like the city is designed to encourage you to move around sustainably without even really thinking about it.
Everything is connected, accessible, and designed with people and the planet in mind
And waste is minimized.
at every step from production to consumption.
Right.
Products are designed for durability and repairability.
Okay.
And there's a thriving repair culture with skilled craftspeople readily available to fix anything that breaks people. People take pride in maintaining and extending the life of their belongings.
It's almost like going back in time a little bit to an era where things were built to last.
Right. But combined with modern technology and innovation,
Right.
we can take those principles to a whole new level.
I love this circular city. It makes me realize that the circular economy is about more than just solving problems. It's about creating a world that's more beautiful, more functional, more in harmony with nature.
It's about shifting our perspective from seeing limitations to seeing opportunities.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that the waste we produce is not an end product, but a valuable input for something new.
Transforming trash into treasure.
That's a great way to sum it up. And while this vision of a circular city might seem like a distant dream,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that every step we take towards a circular economy, no matter how small, brings us closer to that reality.
It's all about those everyday choices that we were talking about.
Absolutely.
Buying secondhand, repairing things,
Supporting businesses that might
supporting businesses.
align with circular principles.
They might seem insignificant on their own, but when we do them collectively, they really do have the power to
They can shift the tide.
shift the tide.
It's about recognizing that we're all part of this interconnected web and that our actions have ripple effects far beyond our own lives.
And as we wrap up our deep dive today, I want to encourage everyone listening to check out the European Environment Agency's website.
It's a fantastic resource.
They've got a ton of information about the circular economy.
Specific initiatives, case studies, and practical tips for how you can get involved.
Yeah, and remember, this is about more than just environmental sustainability. It's about creating a more resilient, equitable, and prosperous future for everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the circular economy.
We hope you learned something new
Felt inspired?
and are ready to
Embrace the circular revolution.
keep those circular loops spinning.